on that subject, this will be the final question for this evening. The Congressional Budget Office has come up with a list of 103 programs which could be cut to save the federal government a couple of bucks. Now, among this is the elimination of human space exploration programs. As it stands now, the United States' exploration of space is limited to the missions to the International Space Station, and as it stands, we're responsible for operation, maintenance, and supply of half of that ship. Now, the Congressional Budget Office report argues that this could save us the whopping sum of $73 billion between 2015 and 2023, and also states that advances in technology have generally reduced the need for humans to fly into space, that robots can replace absolutely any human presence in space whatsoever. Now, you, Lynn, you've called for instruments to be sent to Mars in lieu of sending people, but this is very, very different. Here, the only consideration is money. We don't have it. Now, that's the excuse, while the real motive is to completely shut down technological development altogether. And every time we send someone into space, we learn something new. And I think that's what the real target is. Now, while you've indicated that we have no need to send mankind to Mars in person for its own sake, to plant a flag and die shortly thereafter, that's not science. As we begin to master the domain of the inner solar system as a whole, traveling out there will be a natural expression of that dominion, and if and when the overall mission of the development of the solar system as a whole warrants that. Today, it doesn't. But it could have. I go back to the report that's on the site by Michael Kirsch. The nuclear rocket chapter reiterates that man on the moon, what President Kennedy is often most remembered for, was only one step of a broader space program which knew no finality, no limits. As early as 1962, the Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Application, or NERVA, had testing in Nevada which indicated operational status by 1967, with every expectation that we would have nuclear propulsion in operation in the 70s. By 1966, we achieved an operating time of 30 minutes at the full design power, the equivalent of 55,000 pounds of thrust. In 1967, a full-powered test reactor had operated for 62 minutes, which is longer than would be required for most operational space missions. The ability to throttle the nuclear engine, changing the power output while maintaining the operating efficiency, was demonstrated and achieved. The flight test program was cut to save some money by 1965, and in 1973, it was cut altogether by Nixon. Now, if we had as a nation continued on the Kennedy trajectory, we would be having a very different discussion. Man in space would be moot, but that didn't happen. So as you have said, again, even tonight, that man in space has to be part of an entire program, not something in and of itself. It's clear that Kennedy was of that mind as well. In fact, in 1962, on May the 25th, at the White House Conference on Conservation, when he was talking about desalination on a national scale, he said there, "I have felt that whichever country can do this, the desalination, in a competitive way, will get a good deal more lasting benefit than those countries that may be even first in space." And he went on to say how desalination would be the prime accomplishment of science in improving the life of people in a long history of the world. But at the same time, it seems folly to completely abandon our toddler steps into space, especially under the auspices of budgetary considerations. A lot of evil has been and is being done under budgetary considerations. So how do we approach this question from where we are right now of man operating in space in person?
Well, I've just written something as an appendage to something else I've written, but it's an example of my intention in the piece as a whole, which I wrote. But this concluding part, which was the appended part, deals with this other issue. It's a completely different issue. And it's often in life, you have people inventing things which are all fine at the time, but then somebody comes along and makes an invention which just cancels all that because something far superior has come up. Now, this is not quite the situation, not yet, but the thing which I pose, which we are aware of, and what is going on in our basement operation, for example, is a lot of attention to the fact that the asteroids that are out there represent a problem far beyond anybody's imagination. And it would take something of about a mile or so in diameter to hit the Earth just right, and the whole human population is dead. Now, we take the number of the asteroids which fall into that kind of category, and we haven't yet done anything to begin to count the number of these hazards which are running around the tracks of Earth in the solar system, even that particular part of the solar system. Now, I've been fussing on this thing with the question of, since Curiosity. Now, Curiosity, this man-operated landing on Mars, was a great achievement. It demonstrated the ability, above all other things, that man had now reached the point, even though it's a relatively primitive stage, to put things that function from Earth, no human being touching any of this process, except manufacturing the product, yes. Being there, doing it, none. Nothing. Well, it's all done by automation. Now, we've progressed in that direction, and we've reached the point, as this Curiosity shows, it demonstrates the level of technology which has been developed by NASA and related operations, which show what can be done with an apparatus like Curiosity, which is still, I believe, operating on Mars. Now, what we need now is a system of defense, not some economic question, a system of defense of the existence of the human species on Earth. And my view is, as I've stated, is let's take the area of the solar system, the smaller part, which includes Mars, which the Earth is a part of that whole panoply. Now, we know that we have to defend this area of space, of solar space, because we're in it. We're in the area. We're among the targets. Now, I think that suggests that there's a little priority lurking around these matters about getting these big rocks under control. Now, what Curiosity demonstrates is that Curiosity is not the model that's going to solve the problem, but the fact that we, through the space program, have gone as far in success as Curiosity has gone, despite Obama. Therefore, the defense of the existence of the human species has a certain amount of priority over some other concerns. And in point of fact, if we realize that we have to do that and prepare to defend the human species within this area of the solar system, in particular, by defenses stuck up there to operate as automatic defenses, but also directed from Earth by a complex of systems which are on top of some of the garbage out there, like the large asteroids, and build up a system, an information system, to be able to put systems out there that are able to intervene in preventing one of these large objects. It doesn't have to be too large, but 1 mile thick might do it. So therefore, we have to have a defense of Earth from within a territory of defense, which includes the orbit of Mars. And that's our, now therefore to do that, we have to accelerate our nuclear program in order to be able to develop the systems and deploy the systems which are necessary for this system of defense, which is required. And that's what I've been working on exactly this question. Now, I have not got a design to solve the problem. What I have is a certain categorical kind of knowledge of what might be required to solve this problem, and not to conclude things with my design. That's not my style. But to make sure that I'm stimulating people who are competent to pay attention to this kind of complex in order to defend the existence of the human species. Now, I rather think that, contrary to Obama or other idiots on Earth, that that's an important thing to consider. And therefore, what that means is we will be using everything we have in terms of nuclear technologies, thermonuclear technologies, and so forth. We are going to use everything. But this time that we've upgraded the war. The war is now against the threat to the sudden extermination of the human species on Earth. That's the war. That's the mission. And it occurs that if we take that mission as our primary concern, our primary objectives, our overriding concern, it probably will happen that all the other lesser grade threats and problems will fall into place under the leadership of a campaign to defend the very existence of man's life on Earth.
I think that's a very appropriate conclusion to our broadcast for tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and please stay tuned to the LaRouche PAC website. Again, this was the broadcast for November 22nd, 2013. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.